April 11th, 2011. We're on textbook page 216, blue notebook page 192. And we're going to be going over quadratic formula today. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to go over equations in standard form. So we have our f at x is equal to, and you guys are used to seeing this, our standard form equation. We have a, b, and c. That's right. Okay? It's very important you guys are able to look at equation and tell what a is, what b is, and what c is in order for this formula to work. So, if you guys look at example 1 in your textbook, they've given us a question. Question says negative 5t squared plus 10t plus 15. In this equation, what is a? Negative 5. Good. What's b? Positive 10. And c? 15. Good. Good. You guys can tell that. Very good. Now, we figured out before how to solve for t, and that was through our factoring. So I'm going to quickly factor that, but that's not what our lesson is going to focus on today. So first, I look for a common factor, and it turns out negative 5 is a common factor of these numbers. I would take negative 5 out. I'd be left with t squared minus 2t minus 3. Then from there, I'm going to be factoring the brackets. Okay. All right, so we're going to factor this. Take a look at these terms. I'm going to have t as my first term in each bracket. And I'm going to have negative 3 and positive 1. I quickly factored that in my head. So we have our factors. Now if we needed to solve for t, we know that we would split these both and set this equal to 0. So we set t minus 3 equal to 0, t plus 1 equal to 0, t is equal to negative 1, and t is equal to 3. We have our two options. Okay? So we know how to solve t that way. I'm going to give you a formula today, this quadratic formula, where you can also solve any of these equations the exact same way. So we're going to rewrite what we had above. Our question gave us negative 5t squared plus 10t plus 15. Right? And our quadratic equation looks like this. Okay? Make sure you have this down. The quadratic equation says that, even though they didn't put this in here, x or t, in this case it'll be t is equal to negative b plus or minus the root of b squared minus 4ac all above 2a. So they're giving us a pretty in-depth formula. All we're actually doing is plugging in values for each of those. So if you guys look, we already discovered that negative 5 is our a. So for our a here, we'll be putting in negative 5. And for our a here, we'll be putting in negative 5. Our b is positive 10. So I'll be replacing just the b. The negative still stays with positive 10. I'll be replacing that b with positive 10. And finally, I'll be replacing that c with 15. So we're going to rewrite this entire equation out, just so it all makes sense to you. I'll write it a little bigger. So in this case, t, normally it's x. T is equal to negative. Now we said we're going to replace it with our 10. Very important that you guys get plus or minus, because we're actually going to end up with two answers. As we discovered before, there are two answers to this. Once again, we replace b with 10 squared minus 4. 4 is always going to be there. Our a was negative 5, and our c was positive 15. Well, you don't actually have to write that positive sign in, but we got it in there anyway. And the entire equation is all above. That was surprisingly hard to do. Negative 5. Okay? So I've replaced all the values in this quadratic formula with our a, b, and c. Let's not underline c. From our standard equation. We're going to carry this out to solve for what t is equal to. So, for first instance, we have negative 10 plus or minus. That's hard to do. 10 squared is what? 100. Simple. Okay. This says negative 4 times negative 5. Anyone know? Positive 20 times 15? Is it 400? I would assume it's 300. Positive 300. It was good effort. At least you tried. And what is our 2 times negative 5? Negative 10. Okay. So we still have our t is equal to this. We're working through BEDMAS, finding out what t is equal to. Next line. Negative 10 plus or minus. This is going to be the root of 400. Divided by negative 10 again. What's the root of 400? Anyone know? 20. Plus or minus 20. Subtract 10. Okay, so what's very important right now is I've worked this down about as low as I can go with what I have. This plus or minus right here, what that's telling us is we're going to actually have 2 equations. We're going to split this. So there's the equation of t is equal to negative 10. This version will say plus 20 over negative 10. Our second version is going to be t equals negative 10, subtract 20. So, like I said, and what we had before, we're going to end up with 2 answers. We're going to work through this. So, negative 10 plus 20, 10. And what's 10 divided by negative 10? Negative 1. Other instance, negative 10 minus 20. Negative 30. Negative 30 divide negative 10? 3. So, if we take a look at our answers, we'll circle them in red here. Negative 1 and 3. Go back up. Our answers are, I love that you're so impressed, though. Negative 1 and 3. Now, you might ask, why do we do the quadratic formula? I could have factored to solve this. You are going to encounter now in this lesson formulas that we cannot factor evenly with whole numbers. Okay? Which means, if you guys remember from our earlier test, I gave you equations that you wrote were unfactorable. So you assumed we weren't able to solve them. We are able to solve them. We just weren't able to factor them the way we were doing it. So in order to solve all those ones now, we have to use this formula. I'm going to put it in again just so it's a little clearer. We're using our quadratic formula. That formula right there. We need to memorize it, because that is how we're going to be able to solve things that we're unable to factor. All right, example 3C. We're going to take a look at that. First of all, normally what I would do is try to factor this equation. So I find the factors of 2, 1 and 2, factors of negative 1, 1 and 1. And I know they need to add up to negative 5. Now, quickly by looking at this, I've realized 1 by 1, 2 by 1, 1 and 2. No combination gets to 5. Let's go across. 2 by 1 and 1 by 1. Exact same thing. So, am I able to factor this? No, I cannot factor this. But it does not mean I can't solve it. In order to solve it, I'm going to be using our quadratic formula. So, first of all, my A is 2. My B is negative 5. And my C is negative 1. I'm going to rewrite our quadratic formula out and plug things in. In this case, it's going to be x. And remember, we're finding out what the variable is. That's why we use this formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus, I can't draw straight lines well, b squared minus 4ac above 2a. Okay? And we'll quickly, here's our a's, so we're going to be substituting positive 2 for those. Our b's, we'll be substituting negative 5. And our c, we'll be substituting negative 1. X is equal to negative. This will be negative 5. You guys want me to do it in blue? I'll keep the colors the same. plus or minus the root of, once again, negative 5 squared, whoops, did the wrong one there, squared, the other one's going to disappear, minus 4, A is 2, and C is negative 1. And this is all going to be above 2 times 2. Okay, so this says negative 5. In other words, that is positive 5. Plus or minus, whoa, negative 5 squared. Negative 5 squared is going to be 25. Now this says negative 4 times 2, negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. So plus 8. All above 4. We'll continue going. 5 plus the root of 33 over 4. So we've now come to a root where we don't get a even whole number. Okay? So the root of 33. 5 plus 5.7 over 4. Now we've gotten to the point where once again we're going to have to split it. So we have one of them that says 5 plus 5.7 over 4. Another one says 5 subtracted by 5.7 over 4. This will be 10.7 over 4. Anyone know? I'll leave that for a second while someone figures it out. This one will be negative 0.7 over 4. So, it's 2.4? Okay, so we have 2.67. And anyone want to help with the other one? Negative. It's definitely negative. 0.175. Beautiful. Okay, so let's rewrite these. What that means is our x-intercepts are zeros. One of them, x is equal to 2.7, not an even, well, it is an even number, not a whole number. And negative 1.75. So if you notice here, these are ones we are unable to factor. So in this question, our A, B, and C are laid out. I'm going to quickly put in the quadratic formula just for argument's sake. So B is 10 plus or minus, once again, 10 squared minus 4. A is negative 5. C is negative 3. All above 2 times negative 5. Now I'm going to quickly go over this part. Negative 10 plus or minus the root of 100. Here is what's important. Negative 4 times negative 5 is what? Alright, sorry, we're going to change C to negative 15. I had to make this up. So we have our negative 15. Now, negative 4 times negative 5, positive 20. Positive 20 times negative 15, negative 300. All above, negative 10. What is that going to mean? Negative 10 plus or minus the root of negative 200. Okay, can I find the root of a negative number? No, there are no two numbers that are identical that can give us a negative. So this would be an example of something we are unable to factor. There are no zeros. So we know this parabola does not cross the x-intercept. Do you guys have any questions about that?